CramAmeriMania.
The Cold War is talked about a great deal because it spanned a majority of the last century. The communist Soviet Union and the capitalist United States spent small fortunes expanding their nuclear arsenals. Aside from the arms buildup, the Cold War brought a significant change in American culture. Red became a bad word. Fear of communist infiltration allowed Senator Joseph McCarthy, among others, to effectively go on a witch hunt, accusing prominent individuals of being spies for the Soviets. Since the two superpowers had the ability to destroy human life should a nuclear war break out, and neither thought that would be a good outcome, no direct conflict occurred between the USA and the USSR. Instead, smaller conflicts like the Vietnam War were fought as skirmishes. The most beneficial of these skirmishes was the space race, which saw the first human being to walk on the moon. The 1960s saw social unrest and calls for change that rivaled that of the Progressive Era. The most prominent movements of the time were the Civil Rights Movement, championed most famously by Martin Luther King Jr., which fought against racial segregation. The Feminist Movement, named to know here is Betty Friedan, championed but never passed a so-called Equal Rights Amendment for women. And the Peace Movement, which was run predominantly by young people against the war in Vietnam. The Cold War ended when the Soviet Union fell in 1991. Although he had left office by that time, Ronald Reagan is widely credited as being the most responsible for bringing about this end. At the same time as he took a solid stance against the Soviet Union planning the so-called Star Wars program to shoot down incoming missiles, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev was looking to open up the Soviet Union to the world. It was basically a perfect storm that resulted in the Soviet Union splitting into a number of independent nations. The period following the Cold War is when we begin to use present tense verbs and begin to lack perspective. It will be many years after this video is published that historians will be able to reach some consensus on how recent events fit into historical context. However, basic facts should remain unchallenged. Islamic fundamentalist groups organized across the Middle East angry at US involvement in that region. The most notable of these groups is Al-Qaeda, whose most famous leader was Osama bin Laden. Al-Qaeda successfully staged an attack against the United States on September 11, 2001. The attack served as a catalyst for the United States military to enter the Middle East. Domestically, the so-called War on Terror has significantly changed the political landscape, with increased surveillance and security precautions affecting the daily lives of many Americans. It's even harder to discuss social issues, but it's worth bringing up what historians will likely highlight when they look at this time. First, the internet, which has changed virtually every facet of our culture. Second, equality issues, as arguments over race, gender, and now sexuality are routinely in the spotlight. And third, environmentalism. This has become a growing concern for some as more of the world becomes increasingly industrialized. As I mentioned previously, this will all depend on context. We cannot predict outcomes of events that are currently unfolding. Instead, we must go about our lives as centuries worth of Americans have done and see how things turn out.